Hello and welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast for all things sustainable procurement. I'm sure you're going to love listening to Lorraine Jenks, who has a very long career in sustainability and climate change and all things related to the sustainability of the products that we buy. I think you'll be inspired by our presentation. Thank you very much.
So, Sean, thank you so much for having me here. What an absolute privilege to speak to your audience so wide around the world on a topic that I'm absolutely passionate about. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through my history, mostly to inspire anybody who's watching to change careers like I did at the age of 69 and have a whole new lifestyle and the most wonderful experiences ahead of you. And to show the style that I've adopted now, I've pretty much gone full circle. I don't teach the ins and outs of climate change like I did. I was trained by Al Gore. I'm finding now that I'm called back to big companies to speak to the CEOs and the big decision makers because they don't really understand why they have to do it. And that's where I'm coming in. I'm coming in with the fundamental principles of why. And, just between you and me, they are there because they only think of profit. That's why they've got the jobs they have. And they've never been trained to think the way that we think. So I'm going to tell you a bit of my background. I'm going to put up my slides and show you where this all started. So my background is I'm very, very lucky to have grown up on a farm, a very ordinary South African farm. I think anybody who grows up on a farm understands where things come from, what happens to them and where they end up, and the whole cycle of life. Everything is about circularity on a farm, otherwise the farm wouldn't survive. So I'm very privileged. I took my gap year when I finished becoming a training for a teacher, and I went to live in England for a couple of years, my favorite years. I just loved the UK. Then my husband and I went to Canada, and then we ended up in California right in the middle of the hippie era, right in the middle, 1969, where marijuana was legal. And I worked for accountants that were stoned every day. I mean, you have to believe me. The partners were stoned every day because it wasn't illegal. And then Nixon made it illegal. I came back to South Africa, and with all this knowledge, I had been working for the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, was brand new. We were talking about acid rain. We had the brownout, we called it, when they had the fuel crisis. So they were worried about not so much about the pollution, obviously, but worried about fuel consumption. And they were studying aerodynamics of big trucks. That's what the EPA were doing. Those were the very first bridges that we were building for animals to get across highways, bridges and tunnels. Long ago, came back to South Africa. And by accident, I got a job as the procurement manager for the Southern Sun hotel chain, 82 hotels, and responsible for the contracts for absolutely everything you use in a hotel with this new knowledge. And the only words we had in those days were organic, natural. There were no names. There weren't names for what I was doing and what I was learning and what I was trying to do at the hotel. So I started, this must be 35 years ago. Every time I had to do a new contract, I would start looking at the impact it was having on nature and were there any toxins in the products, and actually probably doing ESG without it having a name. And of course, way ahead of my team. California has always been ahead. So I just kept quiet, carried on doing my job, made it my personal mission to find the greenest version I possibly could of every single thing you use in a hotel. Your cleaning chemicals, your building materials, your operating equipment, your food and beverage, your services, everything, you name it. And I made it a hobby. And I made a point of visiting factories, which nobody had done before, which I found absolutely fascinating, and trying to get them to be a little bit more sustainable. Sometimes I would sabotage a tender when it came in. I never told them because their cleaning chemicals were so toxic. I didn't want to start a big fight, so I would just pretend that the quotes had come in to me too late. And then our very first project was the Sandton Convention Centre, which is a beautiful convention centre here in Johannesburg. the first green development that we did. I was in the development department, and I was responsible for operating equipment and furniture fittings inside, which was also, again, way ahead of its time. So I thought, well, let me do something. And I started in my own time over the weekends. I started a recycling project for the convention center and all the hotels in that area. But of course, there was no time for training. There were no recycling bins. No one had heard the word. We started with paper, and then we got onto plastic, then onto glass. And I did a report. It was such a success. A young man who'd been retrenched helped me. He had a small truck, and he would pick up the dry waste. All we did in those days, he was way ahead. He said, let's separate wet and dry waste. And we picked up the dry waste from all the hotels, and he took them down to an abandoned property and sorted it with people he pulled off the street, homeless people, and told them to pick out the glass, pick out the polystyrene, put it in a skip behind them, and then he sold it, and he gave them the money that he made from those materials that were being sent to be recycled. An incredible success. I saved the hotel something like 75% in waste to landfill, and I don't know, it was a small fortune financially that they were saved. But Carol, I don't know if you know, I think you're younger than me. I hope it's not the same. In my day, if you were in the boardroom and you spoke up about something like this, you might as well have a paper bag over your head because nobody even heard what you said. So I lived in a huff, and that was 23 years ago. I was with them for 15 years, 15 very, very long years. And then I left and I moved to Cape Town. I remarried. And that picture there, girls, any girls listening, don't remarry in your 60s because that's the rest of your life. So rather just live nearby and go on dates. So somebody said, oh, Eskom, the people that supply our power, they heard that I had started 2 online directories of green products. And they phoned me and they said, what do you do? And I actually didn't really know what I was going to do. So I got a bookkeeper to help me with the directory, and Eskom adopted us to run 14 workshops around the country on greening. And they were busy trying to promote, if you can believe it, I mean, this is 23 years ago, they were promoting solar panels with a rebate. Way ahead, way ahead. Nobody knew what the hell we were talking about. And someone said to me, why don't you become a speaker? I didn't even know there was such a thing because I was a teacher. So the hotel started calling me back, which was really a joke, calling me back now after all those years and saying, Lorraine, what were you talking about? And I would teach. Of course, I would teach. And I'd say, here, listen, this is what you've really got to worry about, A, B, C, D. And I would try and pick on products and say, your hotel, your guest amenities, why are they in little plastic bottles? This is 23 years ago, you must remember. Why are you buying water in plastic bottles? And I would look around that boardroom of the heads of department, and only the chef and the maintenance manager would be following what I was saying. And the rest were rolling their eyes saying, what is this woman on about? And my bookkeeper said to me, you know what's wrong? She said, I'm actually a Montessori teacher. She said, bring in your Montessori training. These people are hoteliers. They aren't scientists or financial experts. They don't know what to say. Let's build a green hotel at one of the next big trade shows. And we did. We have a huge hospitality trade show here. So we booked 100 square meters, and I asked everybody in my green directory, which was, we didn't sell anything at all. It was just like a yellow pages. I said, help me furnish these 100 square meters to look like a hotel. Send me some carpeting, some paint, some furniture, some appliances, some food and beverage, some cleaning chemicals, some artwork, everything. And let's make it look like a little hotel. It took off like you can't believe. People really didn't understand it, but it was such a novelty. And then all of the big shows, even BBC Lifestyle, your Grand Designs program on BBC, asked us to furnish a project once. And the rest is history. Since then, it's just gone ballistic. Al Gore's movie came out, which was a major breakthrough for me because I could quote that and say, listen, maybe there really is something here, and here are some scientific facts for you to look at. So now I travel all over the world to speak. I was in Azerbaijan. I didn't even know where it was last year. I was invited to COP26, I think, by the UN, sitting next to this lovely man. Oh, what a charming man with such a crazy sense of humor. the two of us sopping wet in Scotland. Both of us had got so wet, laughing, and he turned out to be the king of the Netherlands. And suddenly I didn't know what to say to him. And in those last two pictures are none of your business unless you come to one of my training sessions. So now what I do is I speak, obviously, I've told you, I train. I'm a consultant to absolutely anybody who will listen. I build green hotels at exhibitions. I also build homes, fully furnished from front to back, with only eco-friendly or the greenest products we can find. I was chief judge for green hotels in sub-Saharan Africa. And then those are my two directories. Have a look at them. And if there isn't one where you are, start one. They're really easy to do. Unfortunately, the main one says hotel stuff. It's gone way beyond hotels now. Architects use it, government uses it, everybody, private people use it. And then green stuff links onto hotel stuff, and green stuff pulls across any products that are as green as we can find. I sat with David Baggs through one of his workshops here in Johannesburg. He's doing proper certification. We have very little certification in South Africa, so it's the greenest we can find. And if it's not green, tell me, and we'll take it off. Or we'll explain. Like if a bed company phones and says, I've got a green bed for you, because I can't find a green bed here, except for Haston's, which costs a fortune. And then I say, tell me what. He says, oh, it's got a bamboo cover. And then I say, and the rest, and the rest, and the five. So what we do is we say only the cover is eco-friendly, but the rest isn't. So I'm a sustainability activist. 35 years I've been doing this. And can you believe it, girls? Listen to this. This is why I say, when you wake up one morning and you know what you actually should be doing. I've won 25 awards in the last 10 years. I mean, I still don't believe it. They almost embarrass me. I think maybe also because sometimes I'm the only person who did what I did. So why do I do it? This is how I start. When I'm asked to give a talk somewhere, this is where I start. I have to connect with somebody at what level they're at. If I'm talking to Donald Trump, I will tell him he's going to lose money. If I'm talking to a mother, I'm going to say, your children are going to be affected. So why do I do it? I do it for these three lessons, and these are three, obviously, workshops completely on their own. Climate change, I will do a full Al Gore, it's actually a 4-hour presentation. Eco side, eco means life, and side means to kill. And then social justice. So we address all three. And then I will go through, I've got beautiful pictures of all of those things, which are burn into people's brains. So every time they have to make a decision, in fact, often when they leave my talks, I get a mail the next day, I hate you. I got out of my shower today and I thought, God, I wonder what this carpet's made from. And I wonder what Lorraine would say about my shampoo. Good. That's what I want them to think. So those are the basics of why we have to do these things. And how I do it. This is the difference. I think this is why I'm popular. I use a lot of humor because the topic's not a lot of fun. So I put in some risque jokes and pictures and stuff, just wakes people up, and then they don't forget. So there's too much jargon. There's too much. All those words actually pretty much mean the same thing. But what I do is I go through them and I give the classic definition of what they are so that they're demystified. And then my Montessori training is I keep it as simple as I possibly can in plain English. I go through the fundamental principles, as I've said, again with lots of pictures. I do the science in plain English, and I use pictures and stories so people remember. And then I approach ESG via supply chain, because I did 2 diplomas for supply chain management when I worked for Southern Sun. And I think everybody should get some training in supply chain management. Everything is about supply chain management, if you think about it. The way you run your home, the way you run your business, everything that you use every day, everything you eat, sleep on, drive, play with, work with, buy, comes in, gets used, and gets thrown out. And once people start to think like a supply chain manager, they will never make a rash decision again. And then what I speak about obviously, my two big topics are climate change. That could obviously a whole workshop on its own. Biodiversity. We cannot possibly ever talk about climate change without talking about biodiversity and nature and the general ecosystem collapse. That's what keeps me up. I think those last two are we as citizens, as the public, have the most power, and where we can actually make a very big difference. Climate change, we've got to hammer away, ankle biting, they call it, at our politicians and at big industry. We don't have a lot of power there. What you can do, if you want to, is boycott. One of the big cosmetics companies, it was very quiet actually. America boycotted a shampoo, not with a lot of noise, through Greenpeace. I tell you, it was a matter of days, and they changed the ingredients in their shampoo. So that's the power that we have, is to say we don't want it. And then, of course, all these other things, each one is a little workshop on its own. But, you know, if a company wants me to talk, they must just say, what must I focus on? I'm speaking a lot on net zero now and offsetting. Just spoken to the aviation industry. And, you know, the whole thing was about the offsetting that they could purchase. Africa has become the dumping ground now for offsetting. People are investing. It's the big thing to invest in, not oil now. You invest in offsetting in Africa. And I was put on a panel and I was supposed to support this and I couldn't do it. And just an hour before, I thought, you know, I've got to be true to myself. I've got to be true to my mission and what is worrying me. So I went through some of the scams about offsetting in a nice way. It was surprisingly well received. But I did have very good news, because South Africa is in fact leading research into offsetting with our green hydrogen. And there's a plant that's like a tobacco plant that will grow almost anywhere. And if we pursue that soon, it'll be the answer. My son was a doctor of physics. I lost him this year. All of this was his idea. He thought of hotel stuff and green stuff. He was a doctor of physics, and he would help me with all the scientific terminology. And he was saying, you know, if only we had nuclear fusion. The trouble is, it's so far away. But, you know, technology is happening quite quickly. Once we get that, I think a lot of our dreams will be met. I explain the Paris Accord. I do quite a lot of talk. There's not enough talk, especially in Africa, on adaptation. The insurance companies have surprised me. They're ahead on the risks and things that they won't cover anymore. They won't cover your house at the beach. They won't cover your house on a hillside. But there are some other things that they haven't thought of, things like France. All those tractors that are protesting today in France, they're protesting against the chemicals aside from the financial side, because they're being poisoned by the chemicals. And one day, the man in the street is going to sue somebody for poisoning him through the food that he eats. And in Africa, as I was saying, Africa has not caused all the stuff that's going on with climate change, but we have to adapt. So I do quite a lot of talking in tourism, and we go through looking at the future through the eyes of their guests. Are they ready for extreme weather? All kinds of extreme weather. What have they got in their emergency pantry? Have they got stuff for if they get stuck at home, or if they've got to get out? Have they got a bit of both? And we're going to have to turn agriculture on its head, because a lot of what we're eating now probably won't survive. And what we're doing in Africa, if any of you have heard of the Slow Food International movement, Slow Food International, look it up and join. They are doing phenomenal. We've got 1 million members now around the world. It's based in Italy. Every 2 years, they have a huge big festival in the park in Turin. And what they're doing is identifying, protecting, and cultivating heritage and indigenous foods, because those are the foods that will survive climate change. Yeah, in Africa, it'll be millet and sorghum, not the maize, not the genetically modified maize. And the chefs already actually are starting to cook heritage foods, because tourists are starting to ask for it. People are beginning to learn. And then, of course, SDGs, and the big focus now, the flavor of the year is ESG. Everybody's talking about ESG. And how I apply ESG again. I haven't got that slide here. Again, I use a lot of pictures and stories, and just go through images of what people need to look for. They don't really know what to look for, and they don't know who can help them. And I'll give them some links to all the wonderful GRI and people like that can help them, because the world suddenly realizes there's money in climate change. We can make some money, so all the auditors will do your reports for you and charge you. You could probably do them yourself, especially if you're not terribly big, but I will give them links on. Make it easy. The secret is to make everything as easy as we possibly can. And then who should comply? Everybody. I've spoken to even the mining industry. I mean, I had to laugh. I was phoned by one of our big mines, and they said, will you come and do a keynote at our annual summit? I said, I can't do that. I can't. I'm going to tell you to stop coal mining. And he laughed. He said to me, the difference is, Mrs. Jenks, we only dig it up. We aren't the ones that burn it. And I thought that was actually quite clever. But what an amazing summit. It's the greenest conference I have ever been to in my life. It blew me away. And I think on the QT, they don't talk about it much. I think a lot of them are starting to develop renewable alternatives, and slowly they will phase out coal. Very difficult here in South Africa, because our whole economy is based on burning coal. And people, they're terrified of losing jobs. We've just got to convince them. Al Gore does a wonderful presentation on the transition from coal to renewables, and how easy it is to retrain, and how well it's happening, how well it's being done in the States, and the statistics of great, fantastic job opportunities now in renewable energy. And of course, then the only reason people will ever do anything if they want to know what's in it for them. The good stuff. Mostly, sadly, the people that I have to speak to, the big decision makers, they're worried about not the finance and stuff. Their biggest worry is reputation. Are they going to suffer reputational damage? So they've got to be seen to be doing the right thing. People like, there's a massive conference coming up here soon with Coca-Cola. I'm going to go. I'm fascinated to hear how they're going to get around the people in the audience talking about their plastic bottles. Because when they started here, I don't know about over where you people live, they started that return your plastic bottle and you'll get a refund or a big discount on your next bottle of Coca-Cola. It was such a success that they cancelled it because they weren't selling enough PET bottles anymore. So that's the thinking. And then investor and funder support. People must realize your investors and your funders will not look at you if you're not starting to comply and producing these reports. It does definitely reduce risk because people are finally understanding the full, ESG has to look at the entire value chain. It's pretty damn big. You've got to look at right upstream and downstream of your supply chain, your value chain, and all the stakeholders. I mean, it's huge if you think about it. But let me warn you, once you get started on this, it gets an energy of its own, and it becomes so damn interesting. It almost becomes addictive. I am forever looking up something and saying, gosh, I wonder what the history of this, how is it sourced, and is there a better option for me? And believe it or not, there are good cost savings because people are managing all of this so much more efficiently. And then supply chain managers, as I said, I've got diplomas in supply chain management. We have incredible power. We are the ones who can have 3 companies in front of us and we can say, yes to you, sorry for you, sorry for you. If you don't get it right, we can't go with you. We're going to go with the other people, and they'll start to listen. And then how I get around this, I was facing an audience a couple of years ago of 1,000 people in Cape Town, and they were buyers in the municipality and in the government. So if you know anything about procurement in South Africa, it is rotten to the absolute core. And these poor people, this is the problem. These poor people have not got the training. When I did my training, when I did my supply chain management course here, I realized half the people in my class didn't understand decimal points and percentages because they hated maths at school. So at the tea breaks and lunchtime, my teaching came out. I would quickly run up to the whiteboard and quickly give them a lesson in decimals. So where do I start? I'm facing 1,000 people and I've got to explain climate change to them and biodiversity. And I thought, I don't know how I could do this. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do through their children. So I said, pretend when you have to buy something, go out to tender for something, pretend you're holding the hand of a small child, one of your children, and he's going to say to you, Dad or Mom, please tell me the history of your new watch or your new cell phone or my new T-shirt. You're going to have to start at where the raw materials were sourced for that product and explain to him. Some of it's going to be quite difficult when you explain the rare metals for the cell phone. And he's going to want to know, how far did it have to travel? How did it travel? Did it go by truck or by train, if there was an option? What happened while it was being manufactured? And then I have pictures. Did they use slave labor? Did they use child labor? Did it pollute while it was being manufactured? When they sourced it, by the way, things like palm oil, was it taken from a managed forest or did they chop down forests? What happened to the indigenous people who live there? Show pictures of one of the chiefs in the Amazon. I've been to the Amazon. One of the chiefs in the Amazon sitting on the ground crying because they're ruining his area in the Amazon. The child or the person making the decision needs to see that. Then how is it distributed? How is it packaged? Go through options of packaging. Get them to start some creative thinking. Can they think of a better way to package something? Does it everything have to be sent all around the world? In Africa, we are so rich here. We really shouldn't be importing anything. We should be able to do everything ourselves. And then what happens during its use? I don't know if you know, but the last I looked, I have to look again, to be honest, a lot of our cosmetics and toiletries in South Africa, and I think in America, haven't been tested since 1934. In the EU, they have. My goodness, the EU, they've done it right. But yeah, I don't know so much. So during its use, does it cause allergies? You know, my mom used to say they didn't all have allergies like the kids have today. And then to me, the most important of all, and I've got fantastic slides for that, where does it end up? And when you show that little boy or that little girl where that product that you've just discussed in detail, where it ends up and what it looks like, he's going to look up at you and say, yes, Ma, Dad, you knew, and you bought it anyway. I think they went home thinking, I hope they did. And then who can help? I told you this, this would give them some tips and some links on what they can do. And that NLP is quite funny. It's not neuro-linguistic programming. It's natural language processing. And boy, do they follow you. Hey, just watch your social media. Go and clean it up. Because if they find stuff there, your ESG report is going to mention it. So that's what I do. I help you to future-proof your business, your family, and of course the planet in doing those things. And when I spoke recently, our Unique Speakers Bureau, God, we had 27 speakers. We each had 4 minutes to explain what we did to an audience of 500 people that book speakers. I tell you, it was exhausting. But I said to them, go home and say to your clients, just remember, your shareholders, your investors, and your customers, the forests, the animals, and especially the children are watching you. And they're going to say one day, Mom, Dad, you knew, and what did you do? Thank you, Sean. That's my story.
Thank you, Lorraine. I can't see how anybody is not going to be inspired by what they've heard from you. So thank you very much for that. A few things to pick up on. I'm totally with you on the subject of terminology. And you had that great list of words that, basically mean absolutely nothing. And you also talked about the transition from coal to renewables, or, non-renewable energy to renewable energy. The world faces that. And one expression that I like amongst all these confusing expressions that we use is the expression of just transition. The world has to change massively but we can't leave people behind. Do you have any thoughts on that expression and the kind of coming together of the need to radically transform the way that we produce everything, but then that's going to affect people's lives all over the world?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's such a terribly difficult question, especially here. It really is terribly difficult here.
Mm,
I'm going to say what everybody's going to say. It's education, education, education,
mm,
education. And I think what you have to do, what we found works, is work through the people, work through the community.
mm.
And once you start a trend in your community, for example, put up the first solar panel in your suburb, that the neighbors get curious. And eventually they will start putting them up. And I'll let you know, Sean, I'm going to run a full training session. Al Gore's latest deck of slides that he used I think it was in Ghana. And he's really got some fantastic statistics on the success stories and what works, how to do it, and what to say to people, and to give them hope. It's no good saying you have to do it. Once they understand why they have to do it, especially, it's no good talking to the rich people. We've given up. I mean, if Trump walked in here, I wouldn't even greet him. I wouldn't even try. He cannot understand. He's probably also autistic on somewhere on that spectrum. His brain does not connect. And a woman once explained to me, one of my husbands, I've had three. I'll do a workshop on that one day. I'll write a book on that. I would marry them all again.
I'd buy that book. Yeah.
The one was borderline narcissistic, and she said to me, their brains don't even light up. So if you're talking to someone like Trump, he's just not hearing you. His brain doesn't react. So you've got to get at him through some other means. And we can't wait for extreme weather to get worse. We can't. And the right, God, I hope he doesn't come in America. The right in America now they are saying ESG is socialist, satanic. Have you seen it? Have you seen the stuff they're writing? What's
Yeah,
the
I'm
matter
not
with it?
surprised.
Yep, yep. But there will be a swing. Bill Gates is very positive. And I suppose Michael Moore, you must look at his talk. That's really quite interesting. He's also quite hopeful. I think that my generation at my age, I've watched so many shifts. Even the hippie era, we were anti-establishment. We were going to change the world and everything. I think now the kids coming up, amongst just my friends, I see a split. I see a split of those who want to go technology, and a huge shift for those that want to go back to the old ways, to simple living, organic, good food, kindness on top of everything, kindness to everything, any sentient being. And I think I hope the balance is going to even out. We have to think like that. And I think it'll happen. And when I see, I've been doing this so long, when I see the change and someone comes up to me and they say, gosh, I heard you talk 15 years ago and we laughed at you. And she said, we're so embarrassed now. She says,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. She said, but I've completely changed my lifestyle and the choices that I make.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we need more positive stories, don't we? I think people get weighed down by the doom and gloom and the
Yeah.
inevitability of climate change. We need those inspirational stories of people who've done things differently and succeeded.
And you need the convincing statistics. I always end my talk, which I didn't do here, with good news. I look
Mm,
the night before. I look to see what the very, very latest good news is. And then I'll also do an analysis of pros and cons of EV versus petrol cars.
mm.
Because the argument now is EV is as dirty and as damaging as electric. But if you look at good statistics, you've got to look long term. People look now, they look short term. If you look, obviously, the benefits are much better.
So another thing that struck me, Lorraine, and this will play to our audience because most of our audience are involved one way or another in procurement, and that supply chain controls everything, and procurement people have the power. And I agree with you. I think they do. What would your advice be to the procurement people listening to this episode? That they have the power. How should they use it?
Man, I wish I didn't put that slide in. Damn it, I did it. Oh, damn it. Because it takes a long time to talk about. I should have brought it in. When you do a supply chain management course. You do all that stuff, first in, first out, last in, last out. You do all that stuff. You do mountains of maths and all this. They give you one template on how to assess, say, 3 suppliers. So say you've got 3 suppliers, which South Africa has to learn. South Africa, are you listening? You don't put their names on that template. It's an Excel, it's a basic Excel spreadsheet. So you put supplier 1, supplier 2, supplier 3. And then you have your key performance areas. What is important to you? And when I was in the hotel industry, was it a hotel in downtown Johannesburg, or was it a safari lodge out in the countryside? Because what's important to them is entirely different. And you go through the choices that you have to make. You go through things like service level, price, distance of travels, all those sort of things. And you put a percentage of importance against them. So what to you in the countryside is most important? It would be its safety, for example, to the environment. If it's a cleaning chemical, that will have a high percentage, right down to the less important things. The hotel in the city will have different priorities. And then you match as the details start coming in. It should be in your tender document, of course. As they come in, you start filling in, and all the formulas are built into that spreadsheet. It's magic. You put all that, does all the sums for you, and goes blah blah blah. Supplier number 2 meets your criteria by far, the best of these 3 suppliers. Then what you do now is you can take that very same spreadsheet and add a couple of lines at the bottom for how green is it in the early days? Energy, water, waste. How much are they doing to save energy? Put in a percentage for those 3 suppliers. Are they watching the water? Do they capture rainwater? Yes, no. Put in. This was all based on trust in the early days. Your waste management, what are they doing about their waste? Weight those 3, put them in. And again, it'll go, blah, 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 and it'll give you which is the most compliant. Then you can take that whole spreadsheet and make it only about sustainability. You can put in all energy, water, waste, and everything else that we're looking at for an ESG report, for example, and you can do it yourself. And it does all the sums for you. The work is done for you, and you don't know which supplier it is, which was supplier number 2. And then to make them remember it, I go through all of that again. And I say, if you're choosing a husband, you don't put his name up there. You put man number 1, man number 2, man number 3. And you could put in the measurements if you want to. But I think what you should put in is driving ability and sense of humor as well at the top. And then you could put in all the rest, and you go, blah, 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 and it'll tell you which guy is the most promising for long-term relationship. And they remember. And then they phone me and they contact me and say, please send me that spreadsheet. And I hope they use it, because it's no good. You've got to be objective. You've got to be an outside objective decision maker when you're looking at these things. And it's not easy. But if once it's explained like that, people realize that you can say, these are my criteria. And I told you at the beginning, this is very important to me. So I'm sorry, I can't use you anymore. If you've used him for 20 years, he'll say, but you've used me for 20 years. And then they'll come to you. I had a new pillow the other day. She said, oh man, she said, you'll love my new pillow. I've mixed it hollow fiber, curls, they look like little feathers, but they're polystyrene, and Kapok. I don't know if you remember my generation. My granny used to use Kapok. It's beautiful. It's a fluffy seed. And we used to fill all our pillows with it in the old days. And they actually used it for flotation vests as well in the old days. And she said, I've got 50-50 hollow fiber and Kapok. So I said to her, but how do you recycle it? The polyester. Oh, well, she said, I said, how are you going to separate little feathers of polystyrene and little feathers of Kapok? And I thought, how will I get you to understand? So I said to her, it's like cooking a great big pot of stew, a beef stew, and then throwing in parsley on the top and calling it vegetarian. I said, it's either sustainable and eco or it's not. So she had to take it off my green stuff directory.
So relationship advice as well. I wasn't quite expecting that. so thank you for that.
Anything to make people remember.
Well, absolutely, yeah. No, I think that's really good advice. And I think in your explanation for procurement people, you hit on again a very important point. Sustainability is contextual. In your example, sustainability to a hunting lodge in South Africa is very different to sustainability to a hotel in the city. They're both hotels. They might be owned by the same business, but the sustainability criteria are different. And this is why, I mean, people ask me, oh, is there a what's the magic bullet? How do I just buy sustainable stuff? And I always say, well, okay, but what do you mean by sustainable? Because it's going to be different for every single organization in the world. And even within organizations, it's within the context of what it is you're trying to buy. So it's actually quite complex to
And
understand those priorities from the beginning.
it's complex, but the most amazing thing, Sean, children understand it.
Yeah.
Instinctively, they understand it. I took my son once, my children once, to see where milk comes from because I grew up on a farm and I worried that they didn't know. And I took them to a friend who had a small holding and she phoned me. She said, my cow's just had a calf. Bring the children, let them go. And they were little. Richard was just beginning to speak really well. And we did the whole thing. Cow eats the grass around, turns the grass into milk, and then the calf drinks the milk.
Mm.
He worked this whole thing through for himself now and fascinated that this is where milk comes from. And we're driving home and he's in his little car seat at the back. And I said to him, the kids now, tell mommy, where does milk come from? So he said, well, the cow eats the grass and the grass. And then the calf drinks the milk, keeps quiet. And he said, and then the calf spits the milk into bottles. You see, he thought the whole thing through. And we can't become Mother Grundy's, we can't become green, bunny hugging tree huggers or crystal clutching hippies. They used to call me a crystal clutching hippie. We've got to be realistic. So when I'm doing carpets, for example, for a hotel, I go for a synthetic carpet because especially the modular carpet, because you can move the tiles around. So if you've got a heavy traffic area, you can swap them around. So in that case, you look at the whole life cycle of that carpet, not where it comes from and is it wool or is it cotton or is it sisal. They are extremely easy to clean. And the factory where there's one brand specifically, which is brilliant, the factory is beautifully managed. And the most important thing is the powder you use to clean it is 100% eco-friendly. And I did a big study at one of the hotels. I'm curious by nature, and you become more and more curious when you get involved in sustainability. And in one of their big conference room, they had beautiful wool carpet. And I said, one half I want steam cleaned and one half powder cleaned, and let's see what happens. Just as an experiment. The steam cleaned looked wonderful because it was slightly damp, optically very bright after the cleaning, and the powder side was very dull. But within days, the stains started coming up where it'd been steam cleaned. The powder side, every time you vacuum, you're cleaning the carpet a little bit more. Every time you're putting more powder out, and you just spot clean. So that was an argument where polyester is actually okay. And it doesn't go, I mean, I'm so against fleece jackets and stuff because the microfibers are washing off in the laundry. But with the carpet, they don't get laundered. So, it's not a problem there. Yeah, so we've got to be realistic. We can't be fanatical.
Yeah, carpet is interesting, isn't it? I was talking to a very large French manufacturer of floor coverings. I'm sure you know who they are quite recently. And they will take anything back. They'll take any of their products back, any age, they'll take it back for recycling. But then the problem that they have is actually getting the material back to recycle it because a property developer will construct a building, they'll put a floor covering down that will last maybe 10 or 15 years, and that building would have been built and sold 3 times in that time. And nobody actually keeps the record to understand when they rip up the floor covering, actually, instead of putting it in a skip, you can send it back to the manufacturer, but they don't know that. Now,
They don't.
what they are doing is starting to introduce technology now with chips in the floor covering that you can read so you can actually understand where it came from in the first place and where you can send it
Good.
back to. So
That's
the
right.
whole logistics of recycling are quite challenging, aren't they?
They are challenging, but also people mean well. People actually mean well. Lots of people are doing it for the money, especially with the offsetting. They only see dollar signs. But there's a group in America, they like Boy Scouts and Girl Guides. I forget what they call them. And they had a system called Clean the World. I don't know if you ever saw that. And they started, I mean, my argument has always been little bottles in the bathrooms in the hotels. They drive me mad. There's no excuse. You have a big pump action bottle and you refill it from bulk, but you still see them. So what they were doing in Las Vegas to start with, and then they moved to Miami, is they would get the hotels they would pick up the bar soap, and they would pick up the shampoos and the body lotions and the conditioners in the little bottles. They would melt down the soap, and it can actually have bacteria, so it's got to get sanitized. They would melt it down and turn it into new bars. And then they would wrap that, and then they would people take one pump of shampoo. I mean, they put the lid on. They would collect the shampoo and the thing and put in the little plastic bottle. They would listen to this, they meant well. And it was supposed to be saving the world and all these waterborne diseases. The Africans are dying because they don't wash their hands. They were packaging this stuff in plastic bags, putting it in a cardboard box, putting it on a truck, shipping it out to Johannesburg, handing it out. I've got a photograph of a woman in high heel shoes with a camera around her neck, handing a plastic bag full of plastic bottles and recycle bar soap to a little girl in a pink t-shirt. She's telling this little girl that she's dirty and that she's poor. That little girl is sparkly clean. Her little face is shining. She is so clean. Handing her this packet of bloody plastic, and I don't keep quiet. I wrote to them and I said, Africa does not want your plastic bottles. They're all going to end up in our rivers, and the soap will do if it's not wrapped in plastic. Thank you for the soap. And they stopped. But Sean, actually, to be fair, they really did mean well. These were good country folk, little village folks all over America, collecting these bottles and repackaging them.
Amazing, Lorraine. I think we can probably talk all day, but I think we maybe better close it there. Just thank you very much. As I say, I'm sure our audience will find you inspirational. I've absolutely no doubt. And I could talk to you for days on end. But thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It's been such fun. Thank you, Sean, and thank you for all the wonderful work you're doing. Bravo to you. And to Carolyn. Okay. Ciao.